Matt Boldy is back and will make his return to the lineup tonight against the New Jersey Devils. We'll take a look at a couple of other lineup tweaks as well as the keys to beating New Jersey at the X on today's pregame preview edition of Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duham, and this is Locked On Wild.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any of our new content throughout the course of the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we will preview tonight's matchup against the New Jersey Devils. We'll talk about Matt Boldy's return to the lineup and a potential tweak on the penalty kill as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and as mentioned, it's been confirmed Matt Boldy is going to be in the lineup tonight for the Minnesota Wild against the New Jersey Devils. A home and home here tonight, finishing off after the Wild played the Devils in New Jersey on Sunday. They have not played since, so the Wild getting a few days off to just kind of regroup and get back to where we hope they would be after a little bit of a sluggish month of October. So they'll take on the Devils tonight. New Jersey coming into this game 5-2-1. They also have not played since the game against the Minnesota Wild. And so just an interesting week off, home and home for both teams. Now, for the Wilds, the biggest thing that led to the Devils getting the win in the Sunday matchup, 4-3, was some just absolutely hideous special teams play, particularly on the penalty kill. The Wild allowed 2 goals in 30 seconds apiece, roughly. And had 6 power play opportunities themselves. Ended up only scoring on 1. They had a 6-on-4 in the final 2 minutes of the game, managed 1 shot. And so really it comes down to the special teams being not great in that matchup, because in 5-on-5, the Wild did some really good things. And they held their own against the Devils. And so the hope in today's game is that we see a little bit of a resurgence in what the Minnesota Wild are able to do, in particular on the penalty kill. And I encourage you to go to The Athletic to read Joe Smith's breakdown of the Wild's penalty kill this season. Just some staggering numbers in the penalty kill regard, such as the fact that the Minnesota Wild goalies have combined for an .816 save percentage on the penalty kill. That is 7th worst in the NHL. Minnesota has allowed a league high 13.7 goals per 60 minutes shorthanded, which is very, very bad in and of itself. But I find it interesting that that Smith mentions the Wild tried a few tweaks during practice on Wednesday. They went to more of a diamond alignment in which the 2 forwards up top didn't pressure the offensive player along the half wall as much. They stayed back a little more in an attempt to protect the middle of the ice, where they've been more vulnerable than last season. And so we will see if that leads to some success with this penalty kill against the best power play in the NHL. And we talked at length after the game about the fact that the Devils' power play was able to get the Wild penalty kill to chase, to be moving all over the place and not set in front of the net, helping defend. And so we'll see if some of these tweaks lead to a better performance from the Wild penalty kill. But above all else, and it'll show up in the keys to the game, you can't afford to go to the box in this one. You can't give the Devils additional opportunities to try to get their power play scoring chances. At 46%, it's basically an automatic goal. So you can't give them extra opportunities to get set up on the power play. The Wild need to keep this game at 5-on-5 as much as they can. With Matt Boldy back into the lineup, looks as though he will slot into his normal spot on the second line with Joel Eriksson Ek and Marcus Johansson, which leads to an interesting combination on the third line of Pat Maroon, Marco Rossi, and Marcus Foligno. I don't know what to expect here with that grouping, and so we'll just have to see how it plays out. I mean, the only other option is to put Vinny Lettieri on the third line, and I think between the two, Lettieri is definitely more of a fourth line guy at this point. And so that's essentially the options that you have if you're not willing to promote Brandon Duhaime or Connor Dewar up into that type of role. And so we'll get Pat Maroon, Marco Rossi, and Marcus Foligno. The fact that Maroon and Foligno are on the same line likely means that we'll see a little more physicality with that grouping, with the assumption that if anybody tries anything out there on the ice, that is going to be the line that responds. So I don't really know what that line is going to. I can't see how that's going to perform until we see it in action. So we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out here in this one. So obviously, hoping that the Wilds can get back on track here, but this is not going to be an easy game because even though the Devils, as we talked about, they're not clicking on all cylinders yet. The fact that even though they aren't, they still have managed to win a ton of their games, 5-2-1 at this point. So even though really the power play is kind of keeping them afloat at this point, they still have a ton of speed. They've got great goaltending. They have a ton of elite players on that team. And so you can't just go into this game assuming that you're going to be able to take care of business just because the Devils aren't playing the same way that they did last year. Or you'll end up losing. You'll end up getting beaten by 3 goals. It's very easy for this Devils team to get on that type of a roll. So we'll look at the keys. We'll look at some of the numbers from FanDuel to see some of the interesting prop bets and other things for this game as well. So all that coming up, as well as our keys to the game as we continue today's pregame preview edition of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is incredibly easy to use with a wide range of betting options available. Right now, the Minnesota Wild are sitting at -108 on the money line. The over-under sitting at 6.5 with 134 coming in on the Devils side and plus 110 coming in on the Wild side. But if you want to put down on the Wild on the money line at -108, if you win there, you could throw on Jack Hughes being plus 135 to score a goal during this game. Matt Boldy plus 185 to score a goal at some point during this game. Kirill Kaprizov with the best odds there at plus 100 to score at any point during this game. So you got some good odds there from some players that should factor into the decision here tonight. And once you make your winning bet, you can use your bonus bucks on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and kick off the NFL season. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is also brought to you by Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could do the same thing with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search, according to U.S. Indeed data. And in the time we've been talking about Indeed, 16 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/locked-on to start hiring now. Again, go to Indeed.com/locked-on. That's Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to today's pregame preview edition of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to stick with us after the game tonight for a Locked On Wild postcast. We'll recap all of the action. We'll hear from players. We'll hear from Coach Dean Evison and get a sense of what went right or what went wrong against New Jersey this evening. So as we mentioned, Minnesota Wild currently sit at minus 108 on the money line, courtesy of FanDuel. Obviously, we're getting real close to the game, but earlier in the day even, the Wilds were in positive territory. And so obviously the news that Matt Boldy is going to return has given a bit of a lift to Vegas in those odds. And for the Wilds, before we get to our keys of the game, I do expect to see a bit of a jump from the Wild getting Boldy back in the lineup. Whether or not Boldy himself is able to hit the ground running and get off to a hot start remains to be seen. It's obviously tough when you've been just skating on your own and not getting a ton of practice time in. He practiced yesterday, but is going to be put into the lineup here tonight. So whether or not Boldy brings it himself remains to be seen, but I think getting somebody back in the lineup that is a huge piece of what this team does is going to give the team a nice jolt here in this one. Now, Vitek Vanacek in the optional morning skate was in the starter's net, and so likely leads you to believe that he will be starting again here tonight in this one. And for the Minnesota Wild, they did a good job of attacking Vanacek at points throughout the Devils game, but it also felt like they left a handful of shots and some potential goals on the table. And he made a ton of great saves down the stretch, especially in some of those extra man situations. So as it'll be with every goalie that the Wild face this year, you just have to continue to attack to try to get pucks past the goalie. If you don't attack, or if you're shooting from the perimeter and not getting in close and getting those quality high danger looks, that's where the problems come in, and that's where the easy saves come in for the opposing goalie. So let's get to the keys to the game for tonight's matchup. Number one, stay out of the box. And it's not going to be, they're not going to pitch a shutout in that regard, but you just can't afford to give any additional opportunities to the New Jersey Devils on their power play. You've got to limit the chase penalties, the hookings, the slashings, the trippings, the ones where players are out of position and they're reaching to try to make a play as opposed to simply living for the next play. That's the big key. Live for the next play. If you aren't close enough to track somebody down, better luck next time. You can't get into a situation where you're trying to hook somebody down from behind or putting this Devils power play into positions in which they can come away with the win. Got to keep this 5-on-5. If the Wilds keep it 5-on-5, they have a chance to come away with the win. If not, it's going to be Devils here tonight. Number 2 is that it's time for the top line. Time for the top line to step up. We've not seen a ton from Kirill Kaprizov so far. Matt Zuccarello has had his moments, but has largely been inconsistent himself. Ryan Hartman leading the team in goals right now. That unit needs to come together and gel, or as a lot of you in the comments have suggested, it's time to make a change. You've got to get impactful play out of that group, and it starts and ends with number 97. When he picks it up, those other 2 on that top line will follow, and so will the rest of the team. Second line, they're going to get their opportunities with Boldy back in. They have even with Boldy out. And so now it's time for the first line to take the lead. And how about a goalie performance tonight for key number 3? We have not seen the same level of goaltending this year as we've seen in previous seasons. I've seen a lot of comments on various episodes that Gustafsson's getting beat consistently high glove side. Got to lock that down. Philip Gustafsson, if he can put on a solid performance tonight, a better than solid performance, because Kevin Gorg was just right. He was dead on a couple days ago. This team needs A, goalie performances in order to win. They need both goalies to handle the business, regardless of what's going on in front of them. So let's get a big one from Philip Gustafsson tonight. Let's pick up a win. We'll see what happens. And of course, we will have you covered every step of the way. So make sure to join us after the game tonight for a Locked On Wild postcast. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Wild if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on any of our content throughout the week. You can find new episodes plus pre and post game content for most, if not all, Minnesota Wild games all season as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.